Morning. Morning. So today is our German day, so we start on time. And I want to reintroduce you to Erika Hogran. Erika is president of Research Institute in Brazil, Documents. She's an archaeologist, an anthropologist, social scientist. She's also the vice president of the International Union of Prehistoric and Protohistoric Sciences. And she has worked and works a lot on heritage management issues related to global major landscape transformation processes. So mostly within environment impact assessments in build context. And as part of that, she has developed specific methodologies of working with indigenous communities. So thank you very much. Erika is also a member of our research center.
I would like to thank Luis for the kind invitation to be here today, and all the colleagues. Thank you very much. In this speech, I will present the development and results obtained in research projects that I coordinated in Brazil in the last 20 years. In these projects, archaeology has always been the driving force within a transdisciplinary perspective. In this way, we want to contribute to the discussion about the role of the humanities in facing the challenges of the 21st century, and especially the role of traditional knowledge in designing solutions for a sustainable future. The topic of this event about tangibility and the design of future landscapes will be analyzed through cases in the Amazon region, developed with different indigenous groups. These cases have, of course, very different historical, social, and cultural contexts. Therefore, the communities involved present different perspectives of what they consider as cultural heritage, and especially their perspective of appropriation of this heritage in the design of a sustainable future. First, I would like to present the general concepts of the research projects. The development of an applied science that allies the accomplishment of scientific research with the symmetrical involvement of local communities, establishing a complementary relationship between science and tradition. The perspective of cultural landscapes, which is aimed at understanding the processes of historical formation and transformation of a specific area as a place where different human societies interacted through their knowledge or through their environmental knowledge. The perspective of territory management, integrating cultural heritage to environmental heritage for sustainable practices. And the intensive use of technology integrated with the final goal of media and information literacy, empower people to exercise the universal right and fundamental freedoms, such as freedom of opinion and expression, as well as to seek, impart, and receive information, taking advantage of emerging opportunities in the most effective, inclusive, ethical, and efficient manner for the benefit of all individuals. These concepts are applied under the umbrella of the sustainability science as a holistic approach in research and education. By definition, sustainability science is problem-driven. In other words, it is defined by the problems it addresses, rather than the disciplines it employs. It thus draws from different disciplines as needed and must encompass different magnitudes of scales, time, space, and function, multiple balances, dynamics, and multiple actors. Therefore, sustainability science can be instrumental in promoting and implementing the Sustainable Development Goals set forth in the United Nations Agenda 2030. In the last 20 years, we are developing research programs with different indigenous communities in the Amazon. It is important to highlight that, especially in the Amazon region, archaeological sites are, in many cases, still related to the history of actual native indigenous societies. That's why, between the years of 1940 and 1970, Brazilian authorities forced indigenous communities to move to indigenous parks, bringing dozens of ethnic groups to leave their original territory and to move into new ones, reducing or even removing their property and presence over their traditional lands. In fact, the relations between Brazilians and indigenous nations were very conflictive, isolating groups and causing loss of access to sacred places and traditional territories. In this context, we can find deep processes of destruction and rupture, including the disappearance of material universes and large remodeling of occupation territories. Some traditional places, however, remain in the collective memory of the native societies and are reinforced during their current ceremonial lives. Therefore, research programs developed especially in the Amazonian region, which means around 50% of the country's territory, frequently deal with a recent past, including dramatic events that still occupy a special place in the living history of current communities, requiring the development of program lines and research procedures capable to boosting sustainable actions. After this short presentation, let's go to our case studies. The first case study involves the participation of 11 indigenous groups of inhabitants from the Xingu Indigenous Park. The driver problem defined by the communities was the fear that two of its most sacred areas were being destroyed because they are located outside the indigenous park in land now occupied by farms with construction of hydroelectric plants. A transdisciplinary research was developed over 8 years, leading to the recognition and delimitation of these two sacred places based on detailed archaeological, anthropological, and ecological research. This slide shows the correlation between the indigenous sacred map that they designed, developed by the community, and the archaeological map designed for the same area. As a result, their legal protection was obtained and sanctioned by the Brazilian president in 2016. This was the first recognition of indigenous cultural landscapes as nations' cultural heritage. From this transformation event, the indigenous communities once again made expeditions to the sacred areas and performed their rituals there, as well as teaching their young people and children about their creation myths. All this work was registered together with the communities in a blog Just a moment, please. That remain active even after the conclusion of the program, as part of our social and cultural responsibility. The choice of the tool and the content included text, photos, films, was made by the community together with the research team. They even wrote texts in their original language, as you can see here, for example, here, and so on. They control, too, the people who can join the blog and allow the acceptance only of indigenous people and some guests. Our second case study involves the participation of other 3 indigenous groups also in the Amazon region, Apiacá, Caiabi, and Munduruku. Now, the driver problem defined by the communities was the recognition of an archaeological cemetery as belonging to one of these ethnic groups. This cemetery was identified during research developed in the expansion of a road located outside the current indigenous land, but integrating its ancestral territories. Archaeological research of the site was immediately interrupted and was delimited as an archaeological reserve. Engineering work was adjusted to preserve the location. In parallel, we developed a transdisciplinary research over 5 years, including these 3 indigenous groups, which mapped their different traditional territories and analyzed a possible ethno-historical correlation to the archaeological cemetery site. As a result, it was recognized that the cemetery belongs to the history of one of these groups. Through our negotiation with IFAM, our Federal Institute of Cultural Heritage, indigenous formally received the decision-making autonomy on the fate of the funeral urns collected during the archaeological prospection of the area. This was the first time that the Brazilian government recognized the authority of indigenous communities to decide the destiny of their material remains. From this transformative event, the Brazilian government will soon be establishing a norm that recognizes the archaeological sites located inside indigenous lands as integrated to its cultural heritage. Their management or research should consider and integrate indigenous communities as participants in decision-making. Our third case study, which began in 2014 and is still underway, involves the participation of 2 indigenous groups near the border with Bolivia, the Cinta Larga and the Arara do Rio Branco. These 2 groups had been stressed by the fact that the construction of a hydroelectric plant had destroyed an ancestral cemetery. As a new work was planned to start in the region, the driving problem defined by the communities was participation in the decision-making process from the beginning, to ensure that their cultural heritage and their traditional ways of life would not be affected. Thus, we developed the first Brazilian environmental licensing process that does an ethno-archaeological program since the phase of diagnostic studies. The 2 indigenous communities previously analyzed whether there was a cultural heritage related to its history in the area designed for construction. The result was negative. That is, they did not identify the presence of ancestral traces in these lands. In addition, they assessed the cultural impact that the construction would bring to their lifestyle and established as mitigating measures the development of a cultural rescue program. We was been developing this program for 3 years and should last until 2021. In this work, we would like to point out some activities. The definition by the communities of the structure of the database that is being generated by the rescue of their cultures. This means building an emic system of data organization, including the definition of keywords and the links between the search topics from their cultural universe of reference. The construction of an emic database is certainly a great challenge, both from the point of view of humanities and from the science of technology itself. And we have even been discussing it with our ATM colleagues in Tomar. These photos show reflections made by the communities, and next we have a list with the macro themes, topics defined in Portuguese. In fact, it was translated to English, and in Tupi-Mondé, their mother language. Certainly, this is an activity that will last until the end of the project and will continue to be a dynamic process that requires the expansion of the database or new topics of interest to search. As a second point to be presented is the analysis that we were developing with the communities on the 17 global challenges defined by the UN Agenda 2030. For this, workshops are held for them to carry out future projections exercises starting from the cultural rescue of the past and simulating their development. This photo shows the community analyzing point by point according to the reality and their social and cultural challenges. For them, some of the global challenges are not applicable, but such as hunger and poverty. They have indigenous lands, and there they can eat, they can fish, they can. For other challenges, they have carried out deep reflections and consider important to promote changes as gender equality and education for all. This discussion was introduced in 2018, so it's recent, and we will continue to work with it until the end of the program, for sure. The communities themselves reported that in the next workshop, they will bring forward proposals for measures that can be implemented to advance these challenges and improve their quality of life now and in the future. We now come to the third and last topic, which is related to the mapping of the traditional territories of these indigenous communities. This mapping considers the tangible landmarks of the territory, its physical limits, natural resources like rivers, raw material, among others. It also considers its intangible heritage, that is, the perceptions, knowledge, and imaginary about their territory. Therefore, in addition to a mapping of places and physical reference points, it is a map of the memory and the cognitive universe of these communities. One of the challenges of this work is to develop, together with the communities, the representation of this map of memory and the narratives of the ancients in virtual simulations. We should point out that for these indigenous communities, the possibility of registering their knowledge in the internet environment was received in an extremely positive way. This is because the web environment is much closer to the traditional way of transmitting knowledge, the orality, than all other initiatives that have already been carried out with these communities, books, booklets, printed maps, for example. This slide shows the homepage of 2 internet tools developed with communities. We can see here one of them. We train young people. We have special technological workshops, and they are developing these websites. The work of developing virtual maps from the memories of the elders is being done by the indigenous youth and was a way to increase their interest in the program. We hold technology workshops to train these young people. So, you have many here. All their settlements, their roads, and we are now defining the best representation, of course, of their memories. Is a huge challenge, but we are working on it. I would like here to make a brief parenthesis on the perception of tangible and intangible heritage by different indigenous communities in Brazil. As I said before, during our work, a complex reconstruction of the memory of traditional territories is done, which certainly involves mythology. This mythology has its speciality. That is, the mythical events happened in specific places of the traditional territories of these communities. As part of the activities, we make expeditions of territory to rediscover these sacred landscapes and reintegrate their access to these communities. Back to the places, the rituals that materialize the myth can be carried out again and give it continuity. On one of these expeditions of territory, and after a long time of contemplation, a group of young people spoke. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to live our dream. That is, the reference was the dream or the myth, and not the landscape. They were living a myth, not recognizing a place. Thus, in this case, the contact between the myth and the landscape takes place on the immaterial plane. This fact indicated that although there is a relation between tangible and matter, there is no relation between matter and reality. The intangible is reality, and the tangible, though material, is illusion. I have introduced here this topic to bring other elements into our analysis of tangible and intangible assets. These examples reflect the humanities as something alive, with applications in the present and in the formation of the future. In these projects, the humanities and the archaeology are the driving force to support communities in their decision-making. In this scenario, the humanities move from the information role to the decision-making role. In a world where technology will carry out a large part of the activities and will occupy many current job positions, it is anticipated that the human and social sciences will play an important role as they include critical thinking skills, social perception, and complex problem solving. A formation centered on these sciences would guarantee the necessary resilience in an era of rupture. Thus, sustainability is understood as integrated territory management, including understanding the historical process of formation and transformation of a specific environment into cultural landscapes, including the spaces where different human societies interacted through their knowledge. On the other hand, integrated management of territory can only be achieved, in our view, through this practice of applied science, which combines the development of scientific research with the symmetrical involvement of local communities, establishing a complementary relationship between science and tradition. I would like to return to some principles of sustainability and its application in the humanities. The first point I'd like to highlight is the definition of sustainability. The viability of maintaining socially defined relationships between nature and community over long periods of time. Although the perspective of this definition is the future, that is, long periods of time for the future, the knowledge of models of human occupation and environmental management over long periods of time in the past will bring important contributions to the discussion. Sustainability science itself works towards the definition of models. So the question is, why not include the knowledge from thousands of years of experimentation, adaptations, forms of ecological managing, and traditional ways of life? Especially when some of these practices remain alive and active in today's world. Archaeology and the humanities in general have important contributions to make. The second point that must be highlighted is the assumption of sustainability science as a research process that integrates territory-based experiences. We all know that the topic of land management and cultural landscapes is well developed in archaeological and humanities research, including regions where there are historical correlations between archaeological models and current traditional societies, as in Brazil and in many other countries in Latin America and Africa. In fact, many native societies do not recognize this so characteristically Western split between nature and culture. A certain landscape, a certain environment is their land, including even the spirits of the ancestors that inhabit it. This movement towards a more socially informed and, in this sense, more ethically responsible landscape archaeology considers that the world has many voices and seeks to recognize all of them. And here we come to the third point that I wanted to highlight, related to the practice of transdisciplinary project designs. The guideline on sustainability science presented by UNESCO defines that transdisciplinarity involves interaction among scientists from multiple disciplines with diverse societal, non-academic stakeholders and practitioners in a co-production of knowledge. Transdisciplinarity involves interaction at even step of the scientific endeavor, including co-design, co-production, and co-implementation. Finally, the fourth point I would like to mention is the mainstreaming between sustainability science and education. UNESCO's guideline deals only with higher education, including actions to integrate society. At this point, I would like to go further and include the practice of developing transdisciplinary projects from the perspective of learning organizations. This means developing a continuous learning process for all those involved, including scientists, in order to truly attain a transformative knowledge. Good ingredients for this process are the constant dialogue, the ability to hear and understand different worldviews, and the development of creative products that express the diversity of the results and their richness of content. Certainly, the intensive use of technology has a prominent place in all these actions. So, considering this complex and dynamic reality, we archaeologists and humanists in general must not only analyze our contribution, what our contribution is, but especially what the society expects from our contribution. Finally, we synthesize in this framework what, in our understanding, is the role of humanities in the challenges of the 21st century. Develop scientific projects as partnership projects with the community, incorporate in its objectives the promotion and valorization of diversity, local practices and solutions for sustainable territory management actions, promote the exchange of experiences and knowledge in all levels of action, and the community's digital inclusion in accordance with its critical visions and its future perspectives, incorporate the knowledge and the solutions of the past in current and everyday decision-making processes, and for the accomplishment of all these goals, the responsibility of researchers to participate in integration movements entering humanities and technologies, incorporating creative solutions and encouraging the dialogue between academy, society, government, and companies. In the evolution of this model, the Documento Institute has selected 300 of its main archaeological and cultural heritage projects developed in Brazil over 30 years with the support and participation of local communities, and is structuring its big data in the format of think tank. This work is being developed together with the ITM and as an activity of this UNESCO chair. We practice culture as a vector of solution and social transformation in chains of sustainability to support future decisions. Technology is employed as a form of integration and expression of communities who can finally present their version of history and their perspectives for a sustainable future. Our role is to increase the intensity of this process, consolidating the knowledge and making it available in new formats, and always according to the decisions of the communities on the use of technology, its function and contents. Thank you for your attention.
Project you're talking about. I'm really quite fascinated with it, and I like it very, very much. But it sort of raises in my head certain epistemological questions, and the formulation about tangible material illusion, that raised questions. You at one point later on talked about different versions of history. You're not different versions exactly, you said different histories. So all of these kinds of things seem to me to challenge certain canonical principles of scientific method and the idea of fact or something like that. So I'm just wondering how you address that level of concern.
Yes, we observed that it was the reality. The people that we were working with. It's not a general point of view, but we can also see that many other communities in the world also work with this perspective, not only some indigenous groups in Brazil. We can, in Australia, for example, we have the same. So it's important to comprehend, to see that we have different perspectives of understanding materiality, tangible and intangible in the world. So we can open our minds to define methodologies, maybe not in archaeology or in some kind of project in archaeology, but to understand that we have a multicultural and a different understandings of tangible and intangible. It's not a direct relation between tangible and what is tangible and what's intangible. So these examples show us that we need to think about different comprehensions. Is that?
Just to follow up a little bit, in the spirit of what you're saying is that you want to preserve and valorize to a certain extent the plurality of accounts or plurality of ways of understanding, and that you also recognize that certain so-called universal scientific standards in some ways reflect cultural assumptions which are, they end up disregarding certain other points of view. For example, the distinction between natural environment and cultural environment that you said was a Western idea, and which is usually presented as though it's sort of neutral and universal and objective. In fact, really isn't. And so you're trying to capture these things, and then would it be fair to say that there's going to be another stage toward universalizing, so that we could say something like well, the project of SIPS, a history of humankind, or a history that's sort of an authoritative, or more or less authoritative history that acknowledges and gives fair due to the multiplicity of viewpoints, but nevertheless doesn't sort of descend into a free-for-all relativism.
I don't know if you can think as a global. I think,
at least in Brazil, for now, to see local realities and local manifestations of cultural and cultural heritage and so on. I don't know if we can change experiences, but it's the local realities.